so. Being emptiness. Being the being is being the vast open field of emptiness. Do not ignore the emptiness. Do not try to get away from the emptiness. Do not try to fill the space with things, with ideas and concepts and understanding. The true nature is to not know, and in not knowing, there is pure knowledge, and that pure knowledge is the self-knowing itself, is the being just simply being. And so we have to come to a comfort, let's say, with our own emptiness, to stop ignoring the emptiness, to value the silence of being, to value the silence of being and the depth of presence of what is over the enchanting, alluring pull of the distraction of things. In order to know what is true and real, do not ignore the emptiness. Be able to be alone, to be with yourself, to face yourself, whatever is arising, to be with yourself and to not try to get away, and to watch this mechanism to fill the space, to ignore and avoid the emptiness, to fill the space with things, with more experiences, with more meanings and ideas and concepts, to get pulled towards the new age and metaphysical that gives meaning to spirituality, and yet it means nothing. Anything that means something to the mind is completely irrelevant to truth. Reality is reality because it is the direct experience of yourself. The only thing that is true and real is the felt sense of simply being. When the knowing of who you are is deeply stabilized and rooted, the knowing of the self gives us access as the field of intelligence that knows everything. So there is no longer a need for false knowledge and concepts and ideas and beliefs, because pure knowledge of the self is the knowledge of everything. When you know who you are, when you know what you are, you know what everything is. And this gives us the knowing that everything is real in reality. But when we are seeing from true perspective, we are not hiding in the delusion and the ideas of the mind. And then this is real. Everything is real. But there is no separation, and there is no me that needs to hold protection and move from conditioning and defense. So being the emptiness, being untethered, completely and utterly untethered, giving up all ownership, to let go of all ideas, concepts and beliefs, to let go of spirituality, to let it all go and simply be and find out who you are. In truth, this truth, this absolute truth, this light, this beauty that you are, is before all teachings. And so even teachings can be a certain kind of tethering that at some point have to be released too, right? Even the great beauty of Vedanta, right? It leaves a questioner. It leaves someone that's inquiring and inquiring and inquiring. Do not be content with being the disciple. Know the source of it all. Yes, a true disciple is one with what they are in devotion to. But when devotion is utterly pure, even that is seen through. It's seen through to be the light. That where the seeming disciple, the questioner, the inquirer, right? Where the inquiry is rich, there is no answer, because the answer is the being. The answer is this here now. And in the knowing of the true and only answer, everything disappears but the being that you are. Everything disappears into the light that is shining as the self. And so we keep going and keep going and keep going until everything dissolves into a depth of oneness where there is no one commenting upon it, no one referencing what I am and is it this and is it that. But it's all part of the unfolding for this referencing to happen. And it's all part of the unfolding to connect and share and confirm to support the stabilizing. But just to know that this emptiness is precious, that this silence, this stillness is precious beyond understanding. So do not ignore the emptiness. Be able to be alone, so truly and deeply alone, so as to meet the depths of aloneness that will bring forward fear. It will bring forward loneliness in the process of coming to a depth of aloneness that is a sense of yourself as the ground of being. We have to meet everything that wants to distract us without acting, without reacting, to meet it all. Because when we can meet what feels like an edge, what feels like a boundary, we have this incredible possibility of discovering what that actually is, and that there is actually nothing there. But only when we have the courage to fully open to it and approach it, even to meet it so fully, whatever it is that brings a charge or a surge or an aliveness in the nervous system, we have to meet it in the purity of its alive presence, to know that it is not a boogeyman in the closet. It is just yourself shining in the shadows and just coming forward into the light. So the simplicity of being is so incredibly simple. It's too simple for the mind that wants to find something. It's too simple for the mind that is busy and distracted in trying to understand. It is natural that the mind will constantly try to understand everything, because that is the nature of the mind, is to keep trying to find answers within a limited context. But this answer is not found in the limited context. This answer ends all questions, right? So we keep diving in and diving in. We are not wanting to deny our questions or confusions or our pull to understand, but we are meeting this in the light so it can be seen for what it is. The need to know is a need to protect. The need to understand is a need to protect. Be untethered, be the emptiness. Have no attachment or tendrils holding on to ideas and concepts, because being right is massively overrated. Being right is the opposite to freedom. right? Being right is a protection. Being right is a mask that we have learnt to wear. And that is why if we search for support and allies in the worldly, we will always find a way to confirm that we are right. But it is a false foundation. It is to see through the need to be right, the need to protect, and the way that this is a defense mechanism that keeps you from everything that is longed for. To not need to be anything for anyone in order to be yourself. To not want to be anything for anyone so that you can be yourself. To not to be need to be seen by anyone as anything or as having achieved anything in order to be yourself. To pull back the incredible, potent power of your own true shining light from fragmentation in the world that tells you it has to be this way and that way, and you need permission, and you need to reference this, and this is the right way, and this is what's acceptable. Let it all go and be yourself. See through the illusion of separation. Find out what is real, what is reality. Find out what is truth, in truth, not in concept, not in ideas, not because someone is telling you so. Everything that is spoken here, test it and test it again, test it again and test it again, and find out if it's true. Find out for yourself if it's true. I invite you deeply to test everything in your direct experience. Do not let a single word that is uttered here be carried into the realm of belief, because that is not truth. Let it be the living truth that is alive in your heart as the knowing of yourself. Meet me here in the oneness. Stand alone with me in the oneness of knowing who you are. I need nothing from you. I want nothing from you. Truth does not need or want anything from anyone. It does not make rules. It is not attached. Every being is utterly free to float and be blown around like a leaf in the wind. What is shared here is just a possibility to explore if it feels true, if it resonates, if it dances, if it fans the flame of what you are longing for in the heart. Then explore it, test it, find out, be alone in the silence and contemplate. Be the being and find out if what is spoken is true. Find out, and then we'll meet again and smile and shine together as one, right on the surface of life dancing. So it is only ever about the resonance. It is only ever about what is enlivened in you and an invitation to test it, be it. Where you feel the resonance, it's because you already are that. It is the alive knowing of your very own presence that is already here in the knowing of itself. What is called here is not the mind. What is called here is the consciousness that is pulled to itself. What is happening here cannot be understood or fathomed by the mind, even when we put words to it that seem like explanations and the alive flow of intelligence. It is still always a little bit away from the wordless, unexplainable, undefinable gorgeousness that is the truth, right? But the words carry the resonance. And as those words rise up out of and move into the dancing realms, where there is a resonance, where there is an aliveness, it touches itself. Consciousness touches itself, enlivens itself, starts to illuminate the remembering. And where you feel the remembering, this is where to rest, in the remembering. It's not about a doing. It's not about understanding. It's not about a journey. And yet on the surface of life, it looks like that. Of course, it looks like a process. It looks like a process of everything falling away, everything being eroded. The bricks and mortar and foundations of the fortress of me tumbling down into the dust of nothingness, into the dust of the self. And hear the light shining, and hear the beauty resonating, and hear the truth just simply knowing. So the play of the world is this eternal divine Leela. It's an eternal play that just keeps dancing and flowing. It is reality in truth, because it is all the divine. That's all there is. And this unfolding is a deepening in and in and into a fine and finer frequency of yourself. And so the knowing of that is absolute. So the knowing of that is a clear bell that does not need to reference anything, that it just is as it is. It's so simple and profound that it cannot be understood in any way. So the world as an illusion is the world created by the mind through interpretation and evaluation. The illusion is separation. It's not that this all disappears. Everything remains the same. It looks the same. It's the perspective of seeing that shifts as we come to know the being. What is illusion is the mind's constant narrative and interpretation of what this world is. We could say world is the moving, changing. As we deepen in, the perspective of seeing shifts, and it keeps shifting until it has reached its finest possible frequency of remembering. What is illusion is the mind's interpretation and constant narrative and evaluation of what this is, acting as an obscuration, a karmic obscuration, acting as a veiling or a seeming barrier or a boundary or an edge that keeps the me feeling separate and the world happening to me. Right? This is the cycle of victimization. So we are all in the process here of seeing through this. This is not fully in place. And yet, where it can arise at all is this great opportunity for a deeper integration of the being into every single area of the life. So to know yourself as the being, to be the being, to be the silent, still, unmoving, unchanging presence, to know this as yourself is to come to this moment right now as yourself, simply being, wanting nothing, just being here, and to feel the simple felt sense of your own existence, to feel that you are here and there is nothing else to it. It's not any more complicated than just being here, and that the being that you are, that is here, is not a thing. It is aware of the mind and the body, and so it cannot be defined by the body, right? What is aware and watching the mind, the thoughts that come and go, and the body, and can feel that and can see it, can see the character. This felt sense, you have this felt sense of being that which is watching. This is not inside the body. This is the aware presence that is everywhere, watching and aware. When this aware presence is watching and aware of things, it has a subtle focus turned to the things, watching, attentively watching. There's a spaciousness here, and the felt sense of what you are is that you are the witnessing presence consciousness. You are watching everything. You are aware even of sense perception that can have the possibility of fragmenting. So the awareness of sense perception is a neutral, aware being that does not fragment through sense perception. That sense perception happens, but there's no owner of it. There's just an awareness that is aware, seeing, listening, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, all happening, all by itself. No undoing, no fragmentation, no division. Just the awareness aware of. And as this aware being that is aware of the moving, changing, rests here and watches as the still, silent being that is aware and watching, it starts to feel a deeper sense of its own presence, its own stillness, its own, starts to feel a deeper sense of itself being independent of the things that it is watching, starts to feel that it is not disturbed or touched by anything that it is watching, starts to recognize in direct experience of itself that it is peace and freedom and simplicity, untouched by anything that is moving and changing. And in this simple recognition, there is a greater and greater sense of more spaciousness in the felt sense of what you are. Now, here, it's very easy to just hook on again, identify again, to waver. Because the focus of attention is still witnessing the things. So as this sense of spaciousness comes and this felt sense of not being affected by the things that are being watched, this witness consciousness that is aware, the awareness, starts to fall into more and more of a sense of its own purity. simultaneously, as the mind waves, the mind consciousness is not being fed by attention, it starts to slow and quieten. So the mind consciousness, when it's not being fed, it starts to quieten. When attention resting in the felt sense of being aware focuses upon itself, this is what is nourished, right? So the felt sense of being the aware presence is being nourished by just resting in the stillness of natural essence, nature of this presence. It's feeding itself by just being aware of itself, and just by watching the moving, changing, this spaciousness starts to give a real sense of the independence that awareness has from the objects of awareness. Starts to really feel how it's independently watching and unaffected. Starts to really recognize its own nature as being independent and untouched, undisturbed by anything that it is aware of. So too, it starts to recognize that, what am I then? What is this, right? It starts to fall deeper into itself. And this is where natural inquiry happens. It's not the mind that's inquiring, it's this natural felt sense of this witnessing presence that's curiously falling deeper into itself. It starts to witness itself. It starts to be aware of itself naturally, because there's already this spaciousness from things. And with the spaciousness from things, there's this nourishing of the being happening, where it starts to reference itself. It starts to witness itself. So as it starts to witness itself and be aware of itself, it nourishes itself more deeply. And what starts to happen is that any subtlety of attention that's kind of holding a focus on the things starts to collapse into itself. It starts to be drawn into itself, like really fully drawn into itself, because it starts to feel the sense of freedom. It starts to feel the peacefulness. It starts to feel its own nature as stillness. Starts to feel that silence is what I am. That silence is the nature of this being that I am, just being here. It starts to be so compelled and pulled into itself. And here the remembering, such a familiarity, a knowing in the being that remembers this. And the recognition here is a simple noticing that what I am is not the person, is not separate from the whole, is not the mind, is not the body. The being itself remembers and recognizes what I am is independent of body, mind. What I am is everywhere. What I am is this spacious observer that is the seer and experiencer of all experience, and yet untouched by any happening, completely independent. And here there is this confirmation in the depths of silence, in the depths of stillness. We could say that silence folds so deeply into itself that in the silence it remembers its own nature as silence. It's like a pin pops the bubble, and the silence is so profound, and the stillness is so. This presence, this recognition that what I am is the silence. What I am is this still, silent, aware presence. And a stop so deep in this remembering. A stop so deep that the thought waves of mind stop. Because the attention is so deeply nested and resting in itself. And this remembering is here in the silence, in the innermost sense of the being just being. There is a knowing, and the knowing is so alive. It is a vibrant knowing of the being itself, knowing itself. The stop. When attention is no longer wandering. Now, here, a depth of your own presence, recognizing its own depth of presence, right? It's this incredible folding back into yourself, falling back, curving back into yourself. And this curving back into yourself is this incredible surrender. It's a profound surrender because it's only known through being, because there's no object here. There's nothing to reference but your own presence, nothing to reference but the silence, your own silence, nothing to reference but the knowing of being. And when there is truly nothing else being referenced but the still silent presence, this referencing is this curving back, folding in upon yourself to remember that what you are is right here. Your essence nature is right here and has been here all along, independent of the play of the world, independent of mind and body, completely independent is this essence nature that is a wide open, infinite field of freedom, of beauty, of immaculate, innocent being. So pure, so simple, that the only happening here is the referencing of the being, knowing itself and referencing itself. And this knowing is pure knowledge. This knowing is the start of the flow of intelligence, right? This knowing of the being. So we don't want to move from here to any kind of ideas that the mind might want to try to come in with and overlay, right? We want to allow there to be this spacious clarity as the being recognizes itself and remembers itself, the silence, the stillness. That there is nothing to do, nothing to understand. That the knowing is a self-contained knowing of the being. And the knowing is that what you are is not separate, is not at any distance from yourself. And here there is an intimacy with yourself that is so profound, a profound intimacy in the remembering of yourself. That this has always been here, this silence, this essence nature, this depth has always been here, has never ever left itself. And here in the silence, in the stillness, the fine frequency of remembering, accessing the remembering field, the smriti, the remembering field, right? The remembering is a divine remembering. It's not someone's remembering. It is you remembering yourself, remembering the simplicity and freedom of what you are in truth. This alive field of divine remembering, this smriti, just alive in the remembering of itself, so alive in the remembering of itself. And this aliveness can be felt in your own presence, and your own presence is felt to be everywhere, unconfined, uncontained, limitless. The felt sense of this remembering is a boundless remembering. That you are infinite. And hear the emptiness, because the focus of the being upon itself is focusing upon the emptiness, because there is no content here, no content to be distracted with. We could easily find some, but let's not. Let's just be here. Let's just be here in the emptiness. When the focus of the being is simply being, the felt sense is of an emptiness, of an openness, and yet such a rich and deep contentment. This contentment, this peace, it is the bliss of being. And this bliss is always here. The bliss is the aliveness of the knowing, and this aliveness starts to flow within itself. It's always been flowing within itself, but in your direct experience, you start to feel a flow of aliveness in the knowing, and this is the flow of bliss. It's gentle, and it feels like peace. It feels like contentment. It feels like happiness, joy, and it feels like emptiness, openness. And so all of this flow of alive bliss, it's causeless, it's self-perpetuating, it's flowing within itself, just in the knowing of itself. Very, very beautiful and simple, very innocent and pure. And so this flow of simple bliss, just being yourself, start to realize that bliss isn't what you imagined bliss to be, right? The mind imagines all sorts of things. And that's why we want to let go of all those concepts and mythic ideas, because this is not what could be imagined. This is not what you think it is. This unfolding deeper into the finer and finer frequencies of your own light is not what you imagine it is. And so we have to keep letting go of every attempt to understand and tether onto things and ideas, so that this flow of intelligence can naturally flow within itself to know itself more in everything, in all that is, that this remembering field can really flow to remember itself in and as everything, and that there is a divine naturalness to this. We could say that divinity, this word divine, right? Again, so many concepts, such a loaded word, but divinity is purity. It's the finest frequency, divine naturalness. It's what is natural. It's what has not been tainted by the mind and concept, right? So divinity, the divine, is the pure, untainted. It's that which has not been distorted and corrupted by the mind. So the mind imagines a corrupt idea of divinity as well, right? The mind imagines a corrupt idea of what bliss is, because it's creating concepts according to a limited amount of information. But divinity is just the simple, natural purity of that which has never, ever been disturbed or corrupted in any way. Innocence, purity, your true nature, the true nature of every being, however the character plays out on the surface of life, even the character that might be imagined to be the most evil devil on the surface of life, is utter divine purity in truth, right? Where there's no corruption, where there's utter innocence. This is what divinity is. It's not a state. It is not some kind of exclusive club. It is pure, simple naturalness that is before any distortion and any disturbance. It's that which has never, ever, ever changed. It is wholeness that is ever, ever whole and pure and so fine in its frequency. And you are this, and you have this frequency already alive in you. And this frequency alive in you is what creates a sense of longing and seeking and searching. But this fine frequency can only nourish itself with more of itself, right? It cannot nourish itself and know itself by feeding itself with corruption, cannot feed itself with ideas and concepts. It cannot feed itself with new age and occult ideas of what spirituality is. It cannot actually nourish itself to a depth of remembering itself in anything that has any meaning. It can only nourish itself with its own pure resonant frequency, can only nourish itself in the now by focusing upon its own purity in order to enliven its own purity through the presence and the felt sense of being. This is what nourishes the remembering of innocence, of purity. This is what nourishes the field of remembering, so that the attention can be pulled away from the distortions and corruption, the delusion, and all ideas of separation, so that the attention is pulled back to its source, so that it can focus upon its source and nourish itself in order to illuminate and remember its essence nature, right? So this is what we're interested in here, right? This is what we're interested in, because this is really beautiful. This is the beauty that you are. This is what you are longing for. This is what every being is longing for. This is the love and happiness and wholeness, the fulfillment that every being is longing for. But the distortion has had us believe that we can find that fulfillment in the world, and it's quite simply not true. And yet there's such a tangled field of false knowledge, information, concepts, partial truths, partial conceptual ideas about spirituality that can touch on this frequency, right? Can touch the resonance, but can trick you, right? Can trick you because you feel the resonance, but then the mind wants to go towards the meaning, right? So we have to stay so pure and so diligent and discerning with the frequency of pure intelligence, with our own purity, so that we can come to the stillness and the silence of being. Now, the thing here is that it's not that interesting for the mind here, right? It's the ultimate boredom for the mind, and it's aloneness, right? So where the mind is habituated to find more entertainment, more experience, more things to do, more ways to be seen, to be confirmed, and all of this is perpetuating the persona. So there is also these protective patterns within the sense of me, the conditioning, these conditioned patterns. And these too are flows of consciousness. They are part of the whole, but these flows of consciousness can pull the attention through usually bringing some kind of fear forward, because fear is the great, it's the great servant to the mind, right? Fear is how the mind keeps itself alive. It just keeps saying, now be afraid of this, now be afraid of this, now be afraid of this. You're going to lose everything. You're going to lose everything. You're not going to know who you are. You're going to lose everything, right? It just keeps, in some flavor, it just keeps saying, don't fall for that. You're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your security. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your life. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to lose your children. You're going to lose your marriage. The mind just keeps telling you what you're going to lose. But there's nothing that's real that can be lost, right? Nothing that's real can be lost. Everything stays the same. It's the perspective that shifts. In a way, everything that you imagine that can be lost, that the mind keeps bringing up these fears of, actually become more beautiful. Because this truth, this bliss of being starts to permeate all areas of the life. It's as if the life has been lived in black and white and it starts to be lived in technicolor, because it's infused with love. It's infused with clarity and divine purity. It's infused with openness and freedom, because the conditioning and the concepts are swept away. And so everything that the mind says is going to be lost actually is still here. And some of it you find, oh, that's still here. You kind of wish it had gone, but it hasn't. Okay. But then love starts to infuse everything, and it starts to transform relationships. It starts to permeate everything and bring everything more alive. So communication becomes more vibrant and open and enlivened and more beautiful. And everything that has been feared by the mind that is going to be lost, it's still here, but it's more beautiful. Nothing that is real and true is lost. Yes, some things do fall away, but in truth, the falling away is recognized to be timely and perfect. It's a natural flow. It's the natural flow, like we're not standing under the trees in fall saying, don't lose the leaves, like trying to stick them all back on again, right? We recognize it's perfect that a tree sheds its leaves in fall, that it's part of the natural cycle. And so too do things fall away. And in truth, when we're aligned with true nature, we recognize that things are shed and it's perfect and timely, that everything has its season in the play of the world, right? But what is constant, what does not ever change, is the essence nature of everything, and the meeting of everything and everyone is what this unfolding is all about. It's about consciousness meeting itself in and as everything in order to know itself in the light of awareness, so that it is free from separation all the way through. So that this light is shining, and what can be recognized is the divinity, the wholeness, God, the mother, in and as everything, right? So even these words, God, the mother, they start to become a little superfluous at some point, because the fineness of the frequency of light is what we're speaking of. And these words, they do serve a purpose, because in the play of the world, the rebalancing is about that every being essentially longing, their longing is for mother, it's for a rebalancing into mother. It's to find the union of Shiva Shakti, as that union is the oneness, right? And that union is in its absolute union, where it's not still testing out its union, it's in absolute union, absolute oneness. In this depth, there's no referencing, right? Shiva isn't constantly saying, are you there, Shakti? Shakti isn't saying, Shiva, don't leave, are you there? Right? There's a knowing, there's a oneness, right? These are just words. And what that union is, we call mother, or we call God, divinity, pure divinity, because it's that which is before any sense of any kind of tainting or separation or fragmentation in any way. We're speaking of a purity, a wholeness, a beaming, shining light that is, it's before, it's so before everything that it's the source of the source, we could even say, because it's before even the sense of source, right? We won't go too much into that now, but it's so pure. It's just so pure. It's just so pure. And you are just so pure, right? So you have this light inside you. You have the unstruck sound and the light that has never ever been lit or dimmed inside you as your essence nature. This is your wholeness. And coming to the being, to the silence, is what leads us to curve back and fall in, to fold into yourself. So we come to silence, the stop, where the first depth of silence is where the witness witnesses itself and falls in to itself. Simply being. And my goodness, the silence. You are the silence. It's the first knowing that what you are is the silence. And my, oh my, that silence, this silence, so deep, so rich, so still, so pure. And yet it's just the beginning of silence, even, right? Who could imagine that there could be more, a deeper silence? But again and again, just like the perpetual surrender, silence finds deeper and deeper, stiller and stiller, purer and purer frequencies of its own silence. Everything is naturally unfolding and carrying itself right now. Let's say the goal is already attained. It may not be felt like that through the lived experience in this moment, but the goal is already attained. Wholeness is already here. We are coming to see through all sense of attainment. But the journey feels like an attaining and a deepening and a clarifying, a purifying, until we come to a depth of resting where it's all that is, that only the purity, only the divinity. And here we could say only Mother, only God. We could say only love, although in a way, none of these words touch what this truly is and how it remains unfathomable, even to itself, to keep just shining in its self-sustaining way, nourishing itself in its own light, right? So as these words come, you can already feel this resonance because you already are this. So in the silence, in the stillness, there is a knowing. And this knowing is the knowing of the being, knowing itself. And this is why we speak of there being no other way to know yourself. Now the mind will keep trying to pull itself into ideas and concepts. It will keep trying to understand, and it will keep trying to give meaning to something that has no meaning, because it is afraid of emptiness. It is afraid of aloneness. It is afraid of purity, even, we could say. because it is afraid that it does not exist where there is that depth of purity. And in a way, it is true. But what does exist is yourself. What does exist is the being. What is still here is let's say, the flow of consciousness that is creative, and it still moves as thought. Creative consciousness, intelligence still moves as thought. In a way, it's just not divisive thought, right? So what falls away is the sense of suffering, is divisive thought. What falls away are the patterns of consciousness that are conditioned and discordant. What falls away is the obscurations of karma. What falls away is all the stuff that you don't enjoy. What remains is the beauty. What remains is what has always been beautiful. It's even more beautiful because it is reveling in its own beauty without doubt and without protection. So as these words come, of course, the mind cannot understand what is being spoken, but the heart can, the being can. The resonance of that which is already here in its purity recognizes itself, and it starts to be pulled more to itself. And so that is why the speaking comes. The speaking comes as a way to illuminate and bring this enlivenment of the resonance of what you are inside you, so that it can remember itself, recognize, remember itself as an infinite field that is pure freedom, pure infinite aware being, this alive presence, right? So this is why, as these words come, it is just to feel the resonance, and where the resonance is alive, to be with the aliveness, to, let's say, face yourself as the aliveness of the knowing of being. Whatever it takes to not turn away, whatever arises, to not turn away, to not act or react, but to meet your edges, to meet the questioning, to meet, we could say, the mind's attempts to understand, but to meet it just as a frequency. Recognize that it's a denser frequency, a familiar denser frequency, and it's trying to pull you away from the emptiness into the familiar. But recognize that where the beauty is, where the truth is in the emptiness. Where the bliss is in the emptiness. It is in the openness. It is in that which the mind will call boring. It is because there is no experience here with a person. The person is also an experience, right? So there comes an enlivenment of experiencing experience. Whee! Right? It's so alluring for the experience of someone to experience doing this, right? So it gives a high to the person to have another good experience and then to talk about it a lot, right? But it's meaningless in truth. If what is longed for is this truth, it is to come to the edge of experience and meet the emptiness, to meet the emptiness. And it does not mean that happenings do not happen on the surface of life. They do. They do. Pure experiencing happens, and it looks like all of this taking place. So again, it's not like the mind imagines, oh, I can never go camping again. Not at all. Camping happens, right? Whatever it is, I can't ever do this. It's not about that. It's that the mind that imagines, oh, I have to take to the cave. Oh, it's so boring. It's not, it's all of that is still in the world of concept. Wherever there's anything saying, this is what you have to do, this is how it should be, it's all the mind. It's the interceptor acting as the spiritual authority. Life is just happening, and everything is just happening. Now, emptiness, the solitude, it's right here. Remember, it's completely independent of the Leela. It's completely independent of the divine play. So the way that integration and embodiment of this truth happens is that life goes on. Life goes on, right? We may wish that it didn't go on in the way that it does, and that suddenly it all disappears and it's just shining light and lotus pads and deities and angels and Krishna playing the flute, and goodness knows what we might imagine. But it's not like that. It's just like this, how it gets spoken. Chop wood, carry water, right? It's the same. It's the same happening. The emptiness is who you are, right? This is why it's so important to recognize that who you are is completely independent of the divine Leela, right? So we could say in total separation, the play is illusion. Once there's a knowing of the being, it's a divine Leela, and the divine Leela continues. It's eternal. It's the flow of life living itself. So it's the perspective that shifts, the seeing through of illusion, the seeing through of separation brings you to the knowing of being, and the awareness of all that is happening. Knowing who you are is not touched. And then the flow of life flowing within itself, flowing in the knowing, life flowing dynamically within itself, ever surrendering into itself. And this is what it looks like on the surface of life, is that your life goes on, you know who you are, and you are constantly invited to surrender and receive everything that you want to resist, everything that you don't want, everything that comes along, whatever it looks like, to receive it equally. And this is what gives the opportunity for there to be a humbling away of the threads of discordant consciousness, conditioning that can keep pulling you into separation even after there's a knowing who you are. This is the way that the unified consciousness comes to really know itself in a non-abstract way. It wants to know itself in the abstract way as feeling itself as the flow, but it wants to know itself right on the surface as life in everything, absolutely everything, right? Camping, eating donuts, whatever, playing music, dancing, sleeping, everything, absolutely everything, right? Going to the grocery store, driving a car, taking a plane, all of it. It wants to know itself in everything. It wants to know itself and awake up to itself in you, in everything, in all of your relationships, in all of your conditioning. It wants to wake up to itself in absolutely every nook and cranny of your life. Nothing will be left out, because love is so pulled to itself. It's such a magnetic pull that it will meet itself in and as everything. This is where, when a trigger comes, the aliveness in the nervous system of a trigger, of a charge, that aliveness is actually love being drawn to itself. You wouldn't imagine that, would you? Right? But the charge, the trigger, the aliveness that you want to react to, resist, that charge in the nervous system is actually love, loving itself, and such a purity. It's creating like a force field, and whatever's in the way of love coming into its oneness with itself, it will stir itself up. And that is why we say don't act or react, right? It's even true with attraction. Even an attraction that feels really like a pull, it's love being pulled to itself. Karma will make action happen and start creating relationships out of that. It doesn't actually want to create a human love, a human dynamic. It just wants to come home to itself, right? It's all that's happening is that everything is being magnetically drawn to collapse into oneness. So if there can be a meeting of everything and just feeling the aliveness, ideally, if we met everything without acting or reacting, and we could meet the aliveness, the charge, the incredible charges that come, we'd go bang, 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 we'd just clear it all away. Whew, done deal. Light, shining, love, beauty, wholeness. But in the play of life, it takes time for this to happen, because we're going to resist and we're going to act stuff out on the surface. We're going to be pulled into playing out dynamics that we haven't seen through. We haven't seen imbalances and protections through, where there's conditioning. We're going to act out everything that we need to act out so that we can see it, so that it can be met. So everything is here for your freedom. Everything, right? And it all starts with being, simply being. Right here now. This is the only truth, is this moment here now, just like this, with no interpretation, no evaluation. This divine moment just as it is, has no meaning, it has no story. You are just here, underneath the divine Leela, right here, always simply being yourself. Hear the remembering in the silence, in the stillness. The divine remembering is an infinite field of freedom, ever shining in the knowing of itself. And you are this field. You are that which knows. And the fine resonance and frequency that you can feel is the recognition of this, right? Let go of all ideas of awakening, enlightenment, all myths, all spirituality. Let it all go and just be here. Be only what is known in direct experience. Let the intelligence of the true knowledge of yourself that is born out of the self be where you are living from, and where you are trusting only yourself. Trust only yourself right here now, in the direct remembering that is this illuminated, ever shining field.